All right. Well, welcome. We're now on day 4 of the arts. Just a little kind of pep talk before we begin. I know this is kind of a hard time because the novelty of virtual learning, continuous learning, or whatever we're going to call it, has certainly worn off, and we're far enough away from June that um, we can't really see the finish line. So this is kind of the time where you just have to buckle down, not worry about things too much, and just take care of business and do your work, and we'll get through this. All right, so let's start. Today we're talking about what kind of knowledge do the arts produce, and then we're going to be working with a informed opinion. So first of all, old business. Continue to work on the Human Sciences Assessment Unit. So you should have the presentation portion planned out by now. And then next class on Thursday, we'll have a live workshop on how to convert this to the PPD form, which you will submit that assessment by next Wednesday, April 29th. I'll release a screencast on Tuesday before the day of the video conference, so you can review the same material and you'll be prepared to ask questions. And there are a number of things I want to bring up today, pop up, so that's why we're doing the full screencast this time. So we're now in the 4th class of 8 of the arts, but remember, 2 of those are going to be the past workshop and the past workshop on the presentation and the upcoming workshop on the PPD form. And now just kind of a review of where we're at, or where I hope we're at. So we began by asking the question, is all art opinion, a couple of classes ago? And I'm trying to suggest that perhaps it is opinion, but perhaps there's more to art than just opinion. We explain this through a zone of exchange where personal knowledge is converted into shared knowledge. Next, and this is in the last class, we kind of broke down our understanding of arts into 4 layers. The personal knowledge, purely personal knowledge, and that refers to creating art and an individual reacting to a work of art. Then we talked about shared knowledge, that there's a zone of exchange where we share our perspectives with one another, start asking knowledge questions, and we begin to create shared knowledge. Then the 3rd level of our metaphorical iceberg, we looked at understanding art. That's where we take our shared perspectives and combining them with knowledge questions, which talk about the general nature of art, social and historical context, which kind of links the relationship of a work of art to what has come before it, particularly in its area, and expert opinion, considering also what people with knowledge in the field have to say. And then the claim was, if we do all those things, then we get to a position where we should be able to make some kind of evaluation of art, that we can generate criteria for features of work that works of genuine art must contain. And the features, this is from Dombrowski now. Let me hide that. Oh, no. Oh, we're back. Okay. Features that she says genuine works of art must contain. It has to create something accessible to the senses. It aims to deliberately shape human experience. With the materials it chooses, its goal is to communicate something to an audience, a purpose set within a perspective, and that genuine works of art use all the powers of subjectivity, that is, uses imagination, creativity, aesthetic judgment, and our capacity to communicate those. So thus far, what we've done, we've learned the structure, how the arts produce shared knowledge. But now we have to ask what type of knowledge the arts produce. And again, before we move on, let's look at our checklist. Here's what I hope you know by the end of this class. I hope you should be able to explain the type of knowledge produced in the arts. And you should be able to identify these features as we take a concrete example of art and work through these 4 layers, which is what we're going to do in the second half of this class. Okay, so now to begin, I don't know why that skips so much. Insert a page break and put this down here. All right, now there is an assignment, and it will automatically come online for next time, and I think you'll enjoy it. It's a question, will the next Picasso be a robot? Because the next class, we're going to kind of wrap this up by looking at, really, how do we tell art? No, let me back up. What's the role of technology in art? And if you use technology, is this still art? What's the difference between traditional methods of art and newer traditions, which I think is a nice way to kind of wrap up what we've been looking at. But now let's come back to the question that we want to look at today. What kind of knowledge do the methods we looked at last time in the arts produce? So we're going to start by backing up and looking at the last slide in the PowerPoint presented last time. So the first thing you notice is that on the left-hand side of this scale, we're talking about the generation of knowledge. We're still not talking about objective knowledge. And when we talk about certainty, which is kind of the topic of the right-hand side, we're not really talking about certainty. We're really talking more about understanding. So, in comparison to our two previous areas of knowledge, this is certainly different from natural science, which strives for objectivity and certainty. It's also different from the human science, which can predict, at least statistically, an objective behavior. For example, in times of social change, we can measure an increase in suicide, even though everyone commits suicide for their own personal reasons. And in terms of certainty, at least a degree of certainty, for example, it predicts human behavior via models that often themselves are based on ideal conditions. So now we kind of come to a better understanding of what we hope to do today. But if the result of our understanding of art is a shared subjectivity, that's what's on the left side of that diagram. And in place of certainty, we have an understanding, deeper understanding. That's at the bottom of the right side of that. One question is, well, then aren't we back to our starting point? Since we said it's subjective, have we really escaped the objection that art is all just opinion? Well, this is going to be a little complicated, but I'm going to try to take it through step by step. How you answer that, whether art is ultimately just opinion or it's something more, depends on how you view subjectivity. And I think there are different layers to subjectivity. Now, when something is purely subjective, it means it's simply a matter of taste. And if that's all there is to art, then there's not really much worth studying, and I'm afraid I've wasted 4 class periods on this. But I don't think so. However, there is another way to view subjectivity, and that's what I want to talk about today. This view of subjectivity would mean that every knowledge claim is bound to a perspective. We all do have perspectives on arts. However, as we share our initial subjective reactions to a work of art, we start to see common themes. Taking these common themes and running them through the mill of expert opinion, we're able to sort out which views were just purely subjective of ours and which views that we happen to hold are views that are shared knowledge that we can discuss and analyze. If you add to that knowledge questions and social and historical context, we gain an understanding of how this work of art fits in with our general understanding of art in a particular area. And we would argue, while that is still subjective, meaning from a point of view, it's not purely personal. It's not purely a matter of taste. So under this view, while we do remain in the arts in the realm of the subjective, we do also, one, get some sort of agreed upon common knowledge. Secondly, by examining that shared knowledge, which has been separated from our purely personal reactions, we gain a deeper understanding of a work of art and how it fits into the larger body of artworks. Third, now this is why earlier it was suggested that we view developing a deeper understanding of art as akin to learning a new language. The more layers of meaning we find, the greater our understanding of art. And the argument is things that fit the criterion of genuine art allow us to do this. So Here, the argument is that there's a category of subjective experience that's not tied to one perspective. In the process described in the last class, we were attempting to extract the useful subjective knowledge from the purely subjective. All right, so now we get to the big question. Now that we've said, okay, on one hand, our knowledge of art is subjective, but this is a shared subjectivity and something that will get us beyond our own personal opinions and give us a deeper understanding. So the question is, what is this shared subjective knowledge that produces, that was the left-hand part of the last slide, that produces a deeper understanding, that was the right-hand part of the last PowerPoint slide. What does it look like? Well, again, let us compare it to the natural sciences. Well, in natural science, subjectivity gives way to an objective description, while in the arts, the perspectives always remain unique. So to zoom in on that a little bit, in natural science, individual work is blended with others to present a new objective view of experience. Everything that was subjective is eliminated. In contrast, in the arts, pieces of art never converge to a common goal that can be achieved by linking them together. A second notable difference is in natural science, one perspective is often invariably chosen over another, replaces another on the basis of evidence, and there is, in that sense, a progression towards explanations that are both broader and, in some sense, simpler. We choose between competing theories, and one often is deemed better than the other. However, in art, that's not the case. One art movement or idea does not replace another. They remain unique and exist side by side. Finally, natural science is the domain of the certain, while the arts is the domain of understanding. So take the Rothko video that I hope you watched last class. Now, I realize that you may not be convinced of the power of art that the narrator talked about when he looked at the painting and said, here's what I got out of that. You may not have bought that. And further, you may not agree with the author or what Rothko saw as the point of art. However, the goal in arts is not necessarily to discover the truth of modern art. The goal is to have a deeper understanding of what modern art represents. And I think you could gain that from the film. So even if you walk away still convincing, modern art is not for me, I don't think that's a purely subjective opinion. I think you now have an understanding of what modern art seeks to do, but you're by no means obliged to accept it. So in short, the more we understand and examine art, the more it's possible to learn from it. This involved moving beyond your subjective reactions to question the art, the issues it raises, the perspective of others, including experts, and the social and historical context, all in an effort to understand the meaning of the works of art. So now I think we've looked at, last class, a method of arts, and then today we've kind of examined, here's the kind of knowledge that we would expect art to produce. So now, what we're going to do now is we're going to work with it. I'm going to give you an example of a work of art, and I hope that in what follows, you're going to go through and see these different levels that we described last time. And the idea is when you look at a concrete example, I think it's easier to understand this process. Again, so I say, I hope that in doing the following exercises, you will see that the process described in this class and the previous one unfolding and informing your analysis. In short, we're going to go through the steps outlined in the last class, but this time using a piece of the arts. So we're going to go through levels. And the first level, I want you to do on your own. But on the subsequent levels, it would be nice, it would be very helpful if you could work with other students. You could work with one other student, or actually it's kind of more the merrier, the more opinions you get. So, I leave that up to you because you should be able to choose who you want to work with, and you have a better technological idea of how to get a hold of them. All right, so I'm taking the coward's way out here. All right, so if you recall, there are two aspects to purely personal knowledge, the purely subjective aspect of art, the creation of work, and obviously we're not going to be creating a work of art today. we're going to be stealing someone else's. And the other part, and that's where we're going to start with, is your immediate expression of the work of art. So we're going to look at this famous work of art called La Disputa by Raphael. It's in one of the popes, I can't remember, maybe it's Pius V. It's in his apartment in the Vatican. So the first thing you need to do is you need to get a better version of the picture than this. So I suggest you go to this link below. Remember, you're working on your own right now. Go to this link below and blow up this picture as large as your monitor will allow. And of course, we still have the problem that we have no idea if our monitors are calibrated the same way so that we're seeing exactly the same colors and things. But this is what we have to work with. All right. So the first thing you're going to do after you look at this painting is you're going to open on Google Classroom the first of their two guided learning sheets today. One is a pre-existing one. The second one's the one I made. So if you open the Day 4 guided learning sheet, I want you to go to the first page of that, which is called Worksheet 1, and it has a crappy picture of the La Dispute on there. Ignore that. Use your own. But quickly, if art's all subjective, I think art always begins as subjective. Just quickly, without thinking too much, on that first page, just write down your subjective impressions. All right. Then, once you've done that, go to the second page of the Day 4 guided learning worksheet called Worksheet 2, where it asks you to think about a few other ideas about the art. And now I want you to fill those out. Now, again, fill them out yourself. But once you do that, then I would like you to work with at least another partner. And if you don't have a partner, you can even ask the opinion of someone else in your household. You can involve your family in this, because what we want to do is get multiple opinions about answers to these questions. So now we're going to enter Zone 2. Remember, level 2. Remember, the second level of art beyond the purely subjective is the zone of exchange, where we talk about our subjective impressions. And then by sharing ideas, this passes into from personal knowledge to shared knowledge. So what I'd like you to do now, of course, you're going to be pausing these as each step. I want you to share your impressions and ideas from those first two exercises on Worksheet 1 with one or more of your fellow TOK students, or maybe with your parents, or maybe with a sibling who's relatively the same age as you, and see what they have in common and where you differ. Now, before you do it, let me explain what we're doing. This is an example of the zone of exchange where personal knowledge is converted into shared knowledge. Now, I want you to record. Now you're going to open up the second guided learning sheet. And if you learned any new things, you say, oh, wow, that's something I hadn't really thought about. That's kind of an interesting idea. Who would have thought my siblings could actually know something? Record any new ideas in the appropriate section of the second guided learning sheet labeled the zone of exchange. All right, so I'm going to pause while you go ahead and do that. And now as we come back, now we're looking at the third level of art. We're going to see to what degree can we understand art. So based on what you've learned so far, the first thing I want you to do is try to generate, let's say, 2 knowledge questions relevant to this discussion, and record them in the appropriate portion of guided learning sheet 2. So now you should be starting to get moving away from your initial purely subjective starting point of art, and see that there are other issues about meaning, about technique that are involved, and your discussions with other people probably have brought those out. Now, in addition to knowledge questions and the perspective of others, the next thing we want to bring in when we're trying to understand a work of art is expert opinion. Again, like the guy, I can't remember his name, in The Power of Art, the Rothko video you looked at, you don't necessarily have to agree with them to have learned something from them. So what I want you to do is, I've got a bunch of links here, and you can open the notes, the day 4 notes from Google Classroom. And the first two are fairly lengthy. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, at a minimum, read one of the first 2 links and read at least one of the remaining 3. And what they're going to do is they're going to give you a lot more background, and they're going to kind of tell you what experts, because this painting has been around since the Renaissance, so what experts have thought about this over time. And then what I want you to think about is, okay, what have I gained? What insight have I learned from the experts? And I want you to record that at the appropriate spot on Guided Learning Sheet 2. And again, we'll pause the screencast while you do that. Okay, now we're back, and now we're going to try to reach that deeper level of understanding of a work of art. And to do that, let's review, we're using Dombrowski from your TOK text. She has some interesting ideas on what she says constitutes a genuine work of art. And here they are, just to review. A genuine work of art creates something accessible to the senses. It's something that aims to deliberately shape human experience, and it tries to communicate something to an audience. It has a purpose set within a general perspective, and it uses all the powers of subjectivity, which are imagination, our creativity, our aesthetic, our artistic judgment, and our ability to communicate them. So in the final section of the second guided learning sheet, I'd like you to explain how La Disputa meets these criteria, or if you feel that it fails to meet one, please explain why. So we'll pause, and it's going to take you a few minutes to do that. So now let's wrap this up. So first of all, I hope that by going through a specific example of a work of art, you can better understand the method of transforming personal knowledge into shared knowledge in the arts. Now, do go back and check your understanding against this checklist at the start of the notes. We're going to jump back here. So I hope by now you're able to explain the type of knowledge produced in the arts, and that you should be able to identify the features, or those 4 levels in the production of knowledge we studied last time, and the type of knowledge studied today through your work with today's study guide. So I hope working with a work of art has made this whole process clear, and has also shown you what type of knowledge is produced in the arts. With this, we'll jump back. Ooh, my keyboard's going in and out. And so this kind of wraps up our introduction to the method and knowledge produced in the arts. So looking ahead, in our final lesson, we'll consider the relationship of technology to art. All right. Well, thank you for listening to this screencast, and I hope you found this useful. I'll be talking to you. Let's see. This is on a Wednesday, so I'll be talking to you next. I don't think there is technically class on Friday because it's Commie Labor Day, so we'll probably be having a conference on the 4th of May, where if anything about this isn't clear, you'll please let me know. Okay, until then, get sleep, get rest, do your work, and be safe. Take care.